He who angers you conquers you. Elizabeth Kenny. Welcome to the space of absolute cognitive autonomy. You are not here to learn how to suppress anger. Suppression is a sign of weakness and internal struggle. We are here to study the mechanics. Anger, irritation, and resentment are nothing more than biochemical signals that your limbic system sends in response to external stimuli. True strength is not the absence of feelings, but the ability to occupy the position of the observer. When you understand why a person is attempting to hurt you, their words transform from arrows into dry data. You cease to be a participant in an emotional exchange and become its architect. In this cycle, we will analyze 7 modules that will turn your mind into an impenetrable fortress, where every decision is dictated by logic rather than impulse. Let us begin the deconstruction. If you recognized your own reactions or past behavioral patterns in these examples, place a plus in the comments. This does not indicate weakness. On the contrary, it is a signal that the process of changing your thinking is beginning. Module 1. The Vacuum of Reaction. Scenario. The glass office. The meeting room on the 40th floor was bathed in cold morning light. Julian sat at the head of the table, his palms resting on the polished wood. His fingers were relaxed. Opposite him was Marcus, whose voice became louder with every second as he paced across the room. "This is a catastrophe, Julian. Your miscalculation cost us the contract with Singapore." Marcus struck the table sharply with his palm, creating a harsh, vibrating sound. "Yeah. You were too arrogant. Admit it in front of everyone." Julian noticed that Marcus's left eyelid was twitching slightly, a sign of high cortisol levels and a deficit of control. He noted how his own pulse quickened by 4 beats per minute and exhaled smoothly, slowing his heart rate. Quote 6, Julian said in a calm, steady tone, lowering the opponent's status by classifying his behavior as irrational. "My assessment? These are facts. You are simply a coward who cannot admit defeat." Marcus leaned forward, invading Julian's personal space at a distance of 30 centimeters. Julian did not move back. He tilted his head slightly by 3 degrees to the right, maintaining soft but direct visual contact. If your goal is to find someone to blame, you are wasting the time of 30 people in this room. If your goal is a solution, return to your chair. Using a logical fork to force socially approved behavior. Marcus froze. His jaw tightened, but the absence of reciprocal aggression from Julian deprived him of the fuel for further escalation. 2. Psychological scan. In this scene, we observe an attempt at a dominant takeover. Marcus uses volume and physical invasion to provoke a limbic response, the fight-or-flight reaction in Julian. Julian applies cognitive reappraisal. Instead of perceiving Marcus's words as a personal insult, he analyzes them as symptoms of a colleague's stressful state. His brain switches from defense mode to analysis mode. Emotional regulation here is achieved through the control of physiology. A slowed exhalation stimulates the vagus nerve, which sends a signal to the brain that there is no danger. When Julian refuses to mirror the aggression, he destroys the feedback loop, leaving the aggressor in a psychological vacuum. 3. Scientific precedent. This behavior relies on the research of Paul Ekman in the field of microexpressions and emotional intelligence. Ekman proved that between an external stimulus and our reaction, there exists a microscopic gap, the refractory period. In this moment, our mind is held captive by a single emotion and ignores any information that contradicts it. People with low levels of self-possession allow this period to last for minutes or hours. Julian, however, has trained his brain to shorten the refractory period to fractions of a second. He recognizes his anger at the moment of its origin, classifies it, and blocks the release of adrenaline before it clouds the cerebral cortex. 4. Strategic protocol. Principle of control. Number 1. The law of the vacuum. Never give the aggressor what they expect, your reaction. The anger of an opponent is a hook. If you become angry in return, you swallow the bait and allow another person to manage your state. Technique of execution. When you are shouted at or when someone attempts to humiliate you, remain silent for 3 seconds. During this time, scan the micro-movements of the speaker's face. Ask yourself, quote 12. As soon as you name the emotion, for example, quote 13, you rise above the situation. Your calmness is your most powerful weapon, as it demonstrates your absolute priority in the social hierarchy. 5. Atmosphere of statics. Silence reigned in the office, comparable to the windless calm before dawn. The noise of the city outside the window seemed muffled and distant. Dust particles danced slowly in the rays of the sun without colliding with one another. Julian felt a pleasant coolness inside. The clarity of his thought was like a sharply honed scalpel. Order was restored not by force, but by the absence of resistance. Quote 14, Charles de Gaulle. Module 2. The Architecture of the Frame 1. Scenario. Quote 15. The dining room was flooded with the warm light of lamps, but the air seemed heavy with unspoken tension. Eleanor slowly cut her steak. Her movements were measured and noiseless. Opposite her, Caleb intentionally clinked his fork loudly against the porcelain. Quote 16. Caleb narrowed his eyes, searching for signs of guilt in her eyes, an attempt to impose a sense of inferiority to establish dominance. Underscore. Quote underscore 17. Underscore Eleanor placed her utensils on the edge of the plate parallel to each other. She noticed how her subconscious tried to generate an excuse, a defensive reaction, and immediately blocked that impulse. Underscore. Quote underscore 18 Eleanor said, maintaining an absolutely neutral intonation, returning responsibility to the opponent through the deconstruction of his assertion. Underscore. Quote underscore 19 Caleb's voice rose by 3 decibels. I am simply saying that family is in last place for you. Eleanor slightly raised her chin, looking at a point just above the bridge of Caleb's nose. This made him feel as if he were under a microscope. It seems that you feel abandoned when I do not follow your schedule, she calmly stated, labeling the emotion to neutralize the aggression. Tell me, why does this cause you such an acute need for criticism? Caleb opened his mouth to object, but hesitated. Eleanor seized control of the context, turning his accusation into an object for joint investigation. He was no longer the attacker. He had become the patient. 2. Psychological scan. In this interaction, Eleanor uses cognitive reframing. Instead of entering the frame of guilt that Caleb built, she creates her own. When Caleb calls her selfish, he uses negative projection. Most people in such a situation begin to make excuses, which automatically confirms the status of the aggressor as a judge. Eleanor, however, uses meta-communication. She begins to discuss not the substance of his words, but why and how he is saying them. Her limbic response is suppressed by conscious attention to detail. She concentrates on the sound of the fork, the angle of her head, and the frequency of her blinking. This shifts the brain's operation from the amygdala, the center of emotions, to the prefrontal cortex, the center of logic. She is not quote underscore 26 underscore with Caleb. She is analyzing his structure, much like a biologist analyzes the behavior of an insect. 3. Scientific precedent. The effectiveness of Eleanor's tactics is confirmed by the research of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky regarding the framing effect. They proved that the form in which information is presented determines the brain's reaction much more strongly than the content of the information itself. In one experiment, it was shown that people choose, quote, 28 more readily then quote 29, although mathematically it is the same thing. Caleb tried to set the frame underscore underscore, quote underscore 30, underscore underscore. Eleanor instantly changed it to the frame underscore underscore, quote underscore 31, underscore underscore. Once the frame is changed, the opponent's brain loses its footing as his prepared arguments no longer correspond to the new reality. 4. Strategic Protocol. Principle of Control number 2. Ownership of the context. The person who asks the questions and provides the definitions of what is happening owns the situation. To make excuses is to recognize the power of another. Technique of execution. At the moment of a verbal attack, use the labeling method. Pronounce phrases such as, "It seems you are angry because you cannot control this outcome," or, "It appears you are using these words to make me feel guilty." Goal. You bring the hidden intention of the aggressor into the light. Once a manipulation is named aloud, it loses its power. You are not defending yourself. You are commenting. This positions you as a researcher who stands above the conflict. 5. Atmosphere of statics. A glass of water stood on the table in which there was not a single vibration. Eleanor felt pure, cold energy of awareness pulsating within her. The surrounding sounds, the ticking of the wall clock, the rustle of the curtains, became clear and rhythmic. In her world, there was no place for chaos. Every element of the dining room occupied its strictly designated place in the structure of her control. When one person shouts, he seeks attention. When a crowd shouts, it seeks a victim. Anonymous Treatise on Social Engineering. Module 3. Deconstruction of the Mass One. Scenario: The Public Tribunal. The press center hall was 75% full. Julian stood behind the podium. Before him were 42 journalists and a group of angry activists. Camera flashes rhythmically cut through the space, creating a stroboscopic effect. "You are a liar, Julian! Your figures are fabricated!" a man in the third row shouted, leaping from his seat. His face was crimson. The veins on his neck bulged, a clear sign of hypertension and loss of cognitive control. The crowd took up the shout. A hum of disapproval filled the room, creating a wall of sound. Julian did not move a single millimeter. His shoulders were down. His hands rested on the podium, but did not grip its edges. He waited for exactly 9 seconds of silence after the hum began to subside, using a pause to regain control over the tempo of communication. "Caleb," Julian addressed the shouter by name. His voice was quiet, which forced the audience to fall silent to hear him. "Your anger testifies to deep involvement in the problem. That is commendable. However," he made a barely noticeable gesture with his palm upward, "when you shout, you appeal to the emotions of those present, rather than to the facts that lie before you on the 32 pages of the report. Facts? You are simply manipulating us," someone else shouted from the left. Julian slowly moved his gaze to the new opponent without turning his torso, moving only his head, demonstrating economy of movement as a sign of high status. "If I wanted to manipulate you, I would be making excuses right now," he calmly replied. "Instead, I suggest you take 5 minutes to study section number 4. I will wait," redirecting the aggressive energy of the crowd into the channel of individual cognitive work. He simply stood there, emotionless, like a rock against which the waves break. After a minute, the noise turned into the rustle of pages. 2. Psychological scan. In this scene, Julian faces the social pressure of a group. The mechanism of a crowd works through de-individuation. People in a mass lose personal responsibility and are prone to more aggressive reactions. Julian uses the pattern interrupt tactic. An aggressive crowd expects from a leader either fear, submission, or reciprocal aggression, struggle. By maintaining the stability of his physiological markers, even breathing, absence of defensive gestures, Julian deprives the mass of the expected stimulus. His addressing a specific person by name, Caleb, instantly returns that individual from a state of being part of the crowd to a state of being an individual. This activates the opponent's mechanisms of self-control and social shame. Julian does not, quote, 47 the shouts. He shifts the interaction from the plane of, quote, 48 to the plane of, quote, 49.3. Scientific precedent. This behavior illustrates Thomas Gilovich's research on the spotlight effect and Solomon Asch's work on conformity. Gilovich proved that we tend to overestimate how much others notice our mistakes or emotions. Julian knows the anger of the crowd is directed not at him as a person, but at the underscore, quote, underscore 51, underscore. By remaining impartial, he destroys this image. Asch's experiments showed that group pressure is colossal, but it disappears as soon as at least one dissident appears who does not yield to the general impulse. In this case, Julian is that dissident for his own ego, refusing to yield to the instinct of social defense. 4. Strategic protocol. Principle of control. Number 3. Isolation of noise. In conditions of public pressure, your task is to depersonalize the attack. Remember, they are not shouting at you. They are shouting at their projection of pain. Technique of execution. Division into atoms. If a group is attacking you or you are at the center of a conflict, choose one person, preferably the leader of the attack, and ask him a calm, clarifying question. Use his name. This destroys the unity of the crowd. Physical anchor. Find one immobile point in the room, a clock, the corner of a painting, and focus 5% of your attention on it. This will allow you to maintain internal balance while the rest of your attention is occupied with the analysis of threats. Do not enter into an argument. Issue facts like a computer, devoid of a resentment program. 5. Atmosphere of statics. In the hall, only the quiet hum of the air conditioner is heard. The sheets of paper in the hands of journalists seem like white ice plates. Julian feels his consciousness expanding, encompassing the entire space. He sees every movement, every glance, but not one of them is capable of touching his inner self. The world has turned into an ordered table of data, where anger is merely an error in the code that he has just corrected. He who knows how to possess himself possesses the world. No, he who knows how to use another's rage possesses his enemy. Sun Tzu. Module 4. Emotional Aikido 1. A scenario, the negotiation deadlock. The hall of a private club in London was furnished with heavy furniture made of dark oak. 2 men sat at the table, Julian and Marcus. At stake was the merger of 2 logistical empires. Marcus, whose fortune was estimated with 9 zeros, slammed the folder of documents shut with force. His face took on the shade of an overripe plum, and his knuckles turned white. "This is a mockery, Julian. You offer me a 35% share when my contribution is valued at a minimum of 48. Marcus stood up, knocking over a heavy chair. The crash of wood against the carpet sounded like a gunshot. "You are trying to rob me. I am leaving the deal right now and will destroy your reputation in the market within 48 hours. Julian did not flinch. He noted how Marcus's pupils had dilated, a sign of a powerful release of norepinephrine. Internal monologue. Quote, _59, ___. Julian inhaled slowly over the course of 4 seconds. Quote 60, Julian said in a quiet, almost insinuating voice. He intentionally lowered his volume, forcing Marcus to be silent to hear him. Quote _61, ___. Marcus froze. His anger met not a wall, but a void. The strength of his shout found no resistance, and quote 62 into Julian's silence. Quote 63, Marcus exhaled, already less confidently. Quote 64, Julian nodded. Quote 65. Marcus slowly lowered himself onto the edge of the table. Anger began to be replaced by confusion, and then by calculated interest. The energy he spent on shouting now required an outlet in the form of a constructive solution to justify his own outburst. 2. Psychological scan. In this module, we study the mechanics of redirection. When a person displays aggression, they discharge a colossal amount of psychic energy. Most people make the mistake of trying to stop this flow with a quote, _66, collision, an argument or reciprocal anger. This only fuels the conflict. Julian uses the technique of quote, _67, He does not deny Marcus's right to anger. He validates it. I appreciate your passion, but instantly changes the interpretation of that anger. He shifts the focus from Julian is a thief to Marcus is a protector of identity. This causes cognitive dissonance in the opponent. Marcus is ready to fight an enemy, but he does not know how to fight someone who understands him and praises him for his own rage. At this moment, a window of opportunity opens. The aggressor loses orientation, and you can impose any scenario upon him which he will accept as a logical continuation of his triumph. 3. Scientific precedent. At the heart of this strategy lies the Schachter-Singer two-factor theory of emotion. Scientists have proved that our experience of emotion consists of two components: physiological arousal, increased heart rate, sweating, and the cognitive interpretation of that arousal. In an experiment, subjects were injected with adrenaline. Those who were told it was vitamins interpreted their arousal depending on the behavior of those around them. If a cheerful person was nearby, they felt joy. If an angry person was nearby, they felt anger. The physiology was the same. The mind searched for an explanation outside. Julian manages this process. Marcus feels arousal, adrenaline, and Julian offers him a new label for this state. Instead of, I am angry because I am being cheated, Julian imposes the interpretation, I am aroused because I am solving a complex management task. Marcus accepts this substitution because it flatters his ego. 4. Strategic protocol. Principle of control. Number 4. Total agreement. Never say no to an angry person. Say yes, and that is exactly why. Your task is to ride the wave of his anger and direct it toward the shore you need. Technique of execution. Use the formula validation plus interception. Validation. Recognize the intensity of his feelings. I see how seriously you take this. Your reaction is quite understandable under these circumstances. Interception. Link his anger with your goal. And precisely because you value quality so much, you will like my next proposal. Result. You transform the opponent from a destroyer into a creator of your common solution. You do not defeat him. You make it so that he defeats himself in your favor. 5. Atmosphere of statics. The club smelled of old leather and expensive tobacco. Julian observed how dust particles in a slanted beam of light slowly settled on the surface of the table. Perfect order reigned in the room once again. No echo of the recent shout remained. Only the quiet scratch of Marcus's pen signing the preliminary agreement. Julian's thoughts were like the mirrored surface of a mountain lake, cold, deep, and absolutely still. Quote 83, Machiavelli, adapted. Module 5, Anatomy of Silence 1. Scenario. Quote 84. Julian's office was bathed in semi-darkness. The only source of light was the lamp on the desk, casting a sharp shadow. Caleb sat opposite him. His fingers were tapping nervously on the armrest of the leather chair. He had just finished a long, convoluted excuse as to why the project budget had been exceeded by 25%. And that is exactly why, considering all market fluctuations, it was the only logical decision. "You do understand me, Julian?" Caleb fell silent, expecting either a reproach or agreement. Julian did not answer. He did not nod, did not frown, and did not look away. He simply looked at Caleb. His face remained a mask of absolute calmness. 5 seconds passed, launching the mechanism of social discomfort. Caleb shifted in his chair. His gaze darted to the window, then back to Julian. 10 seconds passed. Caleb spoke again, his voice becoming half a tone higher. "That we could reduce expenses in the next quarter. If you want, I can provide a detailed plan as early as tomorrow, or even this evening." Julian continued to remain silent. He noted how Caleb's nostrils flared, an increase in oxygen consumption due to stress, and how he began to unconsciously adjust his tie, a self-adaptation gesture to reduce anxiety. 20 seconds of silence passed. Quote, 88. Caleb's voice wavered. "There was one error in the calculations of the marketing department. I tried to hide it so as not to set the guys up, but I will fix everything." Julian leaned forward slightly, breaking the statics. "Tell me about this error in more detail," he said. A victory through the exhaustion of the defense. 2. Psychological scan. In this module, we analyze the intolerance of uncertainty. The human brain is evolutionarily programmed to search for feedback. In social interaction, the absence of a reaction is perceived as a threat or an anomaly. Julian uses the strategic pause. When he does not give the expected answer, he creates an information vacuum. Caleb, attempting to fill this void and reduce his own cortisol level, begins to provide more information than he originally planned. Limbic resonance works here in its negative manifestation. The anxiety of one person is amplified by the silence of another. Julian does not beat the confession out by force. He simply allows Caleb to destroy his own legend under the weight of his own insecurity. Julian's silence is a mirror in which Caleb sees his fears. 3. Scientific precedent. This phenomenon is confirmed by research in the field of social psychology, specifically the work of Nam Kim regarding __quote _94 in silence. Experiments showed that just 4 seconds of silence in a conversation are enough to cause a person a sense of rejection and anxiety. Also, this method is basic in the REI'd interrogation technique, where the investigator intentionally makes long pauses after the suspect's answers. The suspect's brain interprets the silence as a signal that his lie did not work and begins to quote 95 the story, adding details that eventually become evidence. Statistically, people under the pressure of silence tend to speak 30% more truth than in a normal dialogue. 4. Strategic protocol. Principle of control. Number 5. The power of silence. The person who holds the silence the longest always occupies the position of the leader. Silence is not the absence of action. It is active pressure on the opponent's psyche. Technique of execution. The 4-second method. After your interlocutor has finished a phrase, especially if it is an excuse or an attempt at manipulation, slowly count to 4 in your mind without looking away from the bridge of his nose. Rule: do not help him. If he has become silent and is looking at you, do not nod. Allow the discomfort to grow. In 90% of cases, the person will begin to speak again, revealing their true intentions, fears, or hidden data. Your silence makes you unpredictable. and unpredictability is the foundation of authority. 5. Atmosphere of statics. A sterile clarity reigned in the office. The sound of the working computer tower was the only reminder of the passage of time. Julian felt like a surgeon who had made a perfect incision and was now simply observing the process. His thoughts were transparent, like mountain crystal. In them, there was no place for pity or anger, only cold calculation and the aesthetics of control. The art of being invincible lies in the ability to seem vulnerable where the enemy expects your triumph. Lao Tzu, adapted for analytical strategy. Module 6. Emotional Camouflage 1. Stage. Scenario. The observation. In the spacious lobby of the hotel, bathed in muffled light, Eleanor sat opposite Marcus. Before them stood 2 cups of untouched espresso. Marcus, leaning back nonchalantly in his chair, was twirling a gold lighter in his hands. He was intentionally dragging out the pause, attempting to create an atmosphere of superiority. "Eleanor," he finally said, narrowing his eyes slightly, "I know that the delay of shipments in the eastern sector was your personal decision, and I know that the board of directors is not thrilled. Do you not think that your control over the situation is slipping away?" Eleanor noted his micro-expression, a slight lift of the right corner of his lips, a signal of contempt and confidence in his victory. Inside her, absolute calm reigned. Her prefrontal cortex instantly calculated an option. If she responded with cold logic, Marcus would move to hidden threats. To buy time and force him to reveal his cards, she needed camouflage. She intentionally looked away for 2 seconds, then quickly looked at him and slightly squeezed her fingers on her knees. She allowed her shoulders to rise by 1 centimeter, imitating a defensive posture. Simulation of slight uncertainty to encourage the aggressor toward carelessness. I did not think you would find out about this so quickly," she said. Her voice sounded half a tone quieter than usual. She added a barely noticeable pause before the word quickly, imitating confusion. Marcus broke into a smile. Seeing a crack in her armor, he leaned forward, violating the distance by 40 centimeters. His vigilance dropped. "Not only I know, Eleanor, but I can settle everything. If you hand over the management of logistics to me, I will present this to the board as your brilliant castling move. What do you say?" A direct proposal of a deal based on false confidence in her weakness. Eleanor smiled internally. She got what she wanted, a recognition that Marcus was acting alone and had not yet reported to the board. Her weakness was a trap into which he entered with his head held high. 2. Stage. Psychological Scan. System Analysis. In this module, we study selective signaling. The human psyche is designed such that we tend to trust leaks of emotions more than direct words. Eleanor uses this, creating a false trail. Her actions are impression management on a biological level. When she imitates anxiety, Marcus's brain reads it as a, quote, 109. At that moment, he has a release of dopamine, which temporarily reduces critical thinking. He stops looking for a catch and begins to act based on a scenario in which he is the dominant predator. This is not a lie in the conventional sense. It is tactical mimicry. Eleanor does not suppress her anger at his insolence. She simply does not allow it to be born, replacing it with an analytical task. Underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 110, underscore, underscore. She uses his own ego as a tool against him. 3. Stage, underscore, underscore. Quote, underscore 111, underscore, underscore, all the scientific validation. This strategy relies on the underscore, underscore, quote, underscore 112, underscore, underscore, EASI theory, developed by Gerben von Cleef. His research showed that in negotiations and social interactions, people use the opponent's emotions as a compass to calibrate their own behavior. In one key experiment, participants were asked to conduct negotiations with a partner who displayed either anger or disappointment. It was found that when the partner displayed anger, participants became more yielding, but only if they did not have power. However, if the victim displayed slight disappointment or vulnerability, the aggressor tended to reveal more confidential information, attempting to consolidate his success. Eleanor used exactly this mechanism. She gave Marcus information about her weakness, and his brain automatically switched to exploitation mode, turning off defense mode. He gave away the key fact that the board of directors does not yet know about the problem, only because he believed in her camouflage. 4. Stage, strategic protocol, the master key, principle of control. Number 6. Manage vulnerability. True self-possession gives you the right to choose your mask. Sometimes, in order to win, you must allow another to feel like a winner. Technique of execution. False outburst. If you feel that an opponent is searching for your weak point, do not hide it completely. Give him a fake target. Imitate slight annoyance, uncertainty, or even fear in insignificant matters. The rule of 3 seconds. Before you issue a false emotion, fix your state. You must remain 100% cold inside. Your vulnerability must be measured. A slight trembling of the fingers, or a brief avoidance of gaze. This will force the opponent to overestimate his strength and commit an error that you will use for the final blow. 5. Stage, atmosphere of statics. The hotel lobby seemed like a silent temple of glass and steel. The surface of the espresso in Eleanor's cup was perfectly smooth, reflecting the geometry of the ceiling. She felt like a spectator in a theater where she herself wrote the script, set the light, and now observed the performance of an actor who did not even suspect his role. The clarity of her consciousness was absolute, devoid of impurities of pride or fear. Only a perfect harmony of cause and effect. Quote, _122, Seneca. Module 7, State 01. Stage, quote, _123, the observation. The sun was slowly setting behind the horizon, painting the alleys of the Central Park in a thick copper color. Julian walked along the gravel path. His step was measured, and his breathing was practically imperceptible. Caleb moved toward him with a quick stride. His face was distorted by a grimace of triumph mixed with the remnants of long-standing resentment. Quote, 124. Caleb stopped 2 meters away, breathing heavily. Quote, 125. Caleb froze, expecting a flash of rage, a shout, or at least a shadow of despair in the opponent's eyes. He craved to see this mask of calmness collapse, an attempt to cause an emotional collapse through a radical change of status. Julian stopped. He did not look at Caleb as an enemy. He looked at him as a gust of wind or a fallen leaf. Inside him, there was not a single spark of anger. The limbic system was silent. Internal monologue. The object has performed a transaction. Assets are redistributed. My value is not tied to the numbers in the registry. Anger right now is an inefficient waste of glucose. I need to move to the stage of restructuring. Thank you for the information, Caleb, Julian said. His voice was clear and transparent, like icy water. In it, there was not a drop of sarcasm or bitterness. Your actions saved me 3 months of auditing. Now I know where the breach was. Julian smiled slightly. It was the smile of a person who had just solved a complex mathematical problem. He walked past Caleb without even looking back. Caleb remained standing in the shade of the trees, feeling empty. He stole the money, but he could not steal the self-possession. His victory turned out to be an illusion, because he did not find in Julian someone who could be wounded. 2. Stage, Psychological scan. System analysis. We have reached the highest point, state 0. In the previous modules, we learned to analyze anger, block it, and use it. Here, however, anger disappears as a class of phenomena. This state is characterized by total de-identification. Julian no longer identifies himself with his achievements, property, or social status. When Caleb says, "You are a nobody," for Julian, this is not an insult, but a biological fact. I am the consciousness observing the process. At the level of physiology, this means a radical reduction in the reactivity of the amygdala. Julian's brain has switched to a mode of maximum neural efficiency. Instead of wasting energy on an emotional response, the prefrontal cortex instantly translates the incoming stress signal into a plan of action. This is not, quote, 132. It is the absence of ground for the emergence of pain. 3. Stage, quote, 133, the scientific validation. This state is confirmed by the research of neuroscientist Richard Davidson from the University of Wisconsin. He studied the brains of mindfulness practitioners and discovered a phenomenon he called __, quote, _134__. In one experiment, subjects were subjected to painful heat stimuli. The brain of an ordinary person began to generate signals of alarm and fear even before the burn itself, and continued to suffer for a long time afterward. The brain of the __, quote, _135, ____ masters demonstrated a spike in activity only at the moment of physical contact, after which it instantly returned to a state of deep peace. Davidson proved that through training, one can achieve the atrophy of negative neural pathways. You literally, quote, 136, the wires through which anger reaches your consciousness. Julian did not, quote, 137 Caleb. His brain simply did not recognize Caleb's words as a threat deserving of emotional expenditure. 4. Stage. Strategic protocol, the master key. Principle of control. Number 7, the law of emptiness. You are invincible as long as your enemy has nothing to catch on to. Anger is always the defense of a vulnerable spot. If you do not have a spot that you are defending, ego, pride, status, you become invulnerable. Technique of execution. The view from the future. In the moment of the most difficult crisis, imagine that 100 years have passed. All participants in the conflict are dead. Their problems are forgotten. From this point of eternity, look at your situation. It seems tiny, almost imperceptible. Final installation. Stop fighting anger. Simply recognize that anger is a sign that you have given the external world power over yourself. Take a deep breath and return to the zenith, the point where you simply observe the world as a stream of data. This is true greatness. 5. Stage. Atmosphere of statics. The park was plunged into twilight. The air became fresh and still. Julian walked toward the exit, feeling an incredible lightness in his body. In his head there was no noise, no plans for revenge, only crystal clear silence. The world around him was harmonious in its chaos. He was not a player on the field, but the field itself upon which the game unfolds. The cycle is complete. The mechanics are studied. Control has become his nature. Your journey through the 7 modules has reached its finale. We have transformed biological noise into a strategic asset, consistently replacing impulse with analysis and chaos with structure. Now that the experience of Julian, Eleanor, and other participants in this chronicle is integrated into your consciousness, you possess a tool that is inaccessible to the majority: absolute cognitive autonomy. Remember, true strength lies not in attempts to stop the storm, but in the ability to remain that point of peace around which the storm rotates. In a world where billions of people are hostages to their limbic reactions, your self-possession is not just a character trait. It is your highest priority in any social hierarchy. He who understands the mechanisms of the psyche gains real freedom. Subscribe to analyze the hidden laws of human behavior together. And be sure to write in the comments which strategy we should analyze in the next issue.